Well, practice means practice. So I just invite you to listen for a moment and have some practice. Many of you know that was a love song. And it's about a path that strangely is largely unknown in the transpersonal world of those that came to the West from India. The name is Grahastya, which means roughly enlightenment through romantic love, whereby families are created and parents age, become grandparents, have grandchildren have children whose children have children, and then die. It's a strangely missing path, although it is certainly the core foundation of the Indian culture, and all cultures, is to have been created by the romantic love, let us hope, of our parents meeting, having the lives whereby we're here today, some very mysterious way. The seed of life is infinite. We all read in the Old Testament about, in the early pages, about somebody begets somebody who begets somebody who begets. And I always thought that was kind of boring, until recently I realized that it's the very profound reality that we don't think much about. The power of the infinity of creation, of procreation, of life. And so this path is not that well known in our field. It focused more on consciousness than on seed. Although in Indian Sanskrit, you quickly learn that seed is more important than consciousness. We've just been focusing on it, I think because of LSD. Ram Dass went to India to find out what is LSD because of its effect on consciousness, and they started telling us about consciousness. But seed is more critical because it's whereby we all become incarnate in here. No one is here, as Shakespeare, I think, said in one of his plays, I think Macbeth, you have to be of woman born. It's a very deep thing that we see it, but we have to look at it with deeper eyes. For example, Ram Dass, after teaching for 40 years that family life was a melodrama, if you know this quote, you could raise your hand, that he taught for 40 years that family life was a melodrama, and the real spiritual growth you test it in your family. Actually, it's the reverse. is family life is spiritual growth of creating life, but we don't have that type of respect or perception. We've been scientized. Even the term reproduction has replaced procreation. Pro meant on the behalf of the creator, life comes forth. Genetic research is the outcome. GMO, the manipulation of the material plane around the seed. Ram Dass in 2009 found out that he had a grandchild and an adult child, which he dreaded finding out. You can check this out in the Huffington Post, where he was interviewed in 2009 or 2010. And he was hoping that this paternity suit that had been filed about him was not true. The DNA test came back. Lucky for us, and unlucky. He said, I had no idea when he saw his grandchild for the first time. He was like 70 or so years of age, and I must say, I love this man. I appreciate very deeply that he has always admitted his mistakes many times, and we should all learn from that. But he did find out that when he looked at his young grandchild, that he had made a big mistake again. That in fact, loving a child was very similar to loving God. And I think he may have gone further than the article and have said it's not any different at all. But we don't have that background of the last 40 years. We have something about spiritual life that's different from creating life. 95% of the Indo-Tibetan archive has not yet been translated. We're making it, once you start talking with particularly Tibetan translators and Sanskrit translators, you realize how many mistakes are being taken as truth. My area is Kundalini and Tantra, and I can tell you just a tip. Kundalini should be translated as gestation. How many have heard that translation? How many have heard it more about an energy that goes up the spine? Yeah, energy up the spine resonates with an LSD experience. That's what we were looking at to see what was going on in these spiritual traditions. It has very little to do merely with an energy up the spine. It has to do with mother. If you translate it, it talks endlessly about mother. Mother is gestation of life. Let me read just a brief poem that I tried to capture love, romantic love, as a path. Each preferring to give, nothing was ever lost. Stretching ourselves thin for one another, we became vast. Easing the way for me, for you, as the decades wandered on, no sorrow or illness endured alone. I am here, you said, I'm not going anywhere. And when my grip weakens, then my gaze upon you will lock. When that at last should blur, then resolute in my heart shall you remain. Your name, the last sound on my lips. Your lips, the last image in my mind.
Well, for me it's very special to be here today. I have been in ITP 20 years ago during an open doors event. And today I'm here in another kind of open doors as a presenter through the big door. First of all, thank you very much, Stephen Smith. Thank you very much, Sophia University. Thank you, Eurotas, the European Transpersonal Association. And thank you for the transpersonal movement. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm very grateful. I was trained by Salvatore Roquet, a Mexican psychiatrist, in sacred plants and indigenous traditions. I've worked very intensively in Mexico with different healers, and all these experiences gave me an holistic vision of that we are trying to communicate to our students. We have created an Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Barcelona about 20 years ago. We have 3 missions: to train, as a clinic for patients, and a base for communicate information and broadcasting. We have teachers coming from different countries. We also teach, run courses, and we have a program in training psychology and psychotherapy, transpersonal. Conscient presence and integral listening, or the maiotic capacity of shamans and healers for listening without words. Or, in Jung words, the self-healing potential, the trust in the process, and the psychotherapy as a co-creation. All these items, that's why which ones we work and we teach in our institute. We work also in the qualities of the presence, acceptance, unconditional openness, qualities that we think that the psychotherapists, the transpersonal psychotherapists have to have. Devotion, adaptability, integrity, empathy, compassion, and creativity, co-creativity, because psychotherapy is an act of co-creation between 2 or more people. I'm very touched, I'm really touched for this warm auditory, these warm people, this warm public, but I know some of you met me in different places, in India, in Russia, in France, in Barcelona, in California, and that's why I want to be short, because I want to listen to my colleagues, and I want to stop here and only thank you again for to be here, and see you later. Thank you very much.
Okay, 6 minutes is going to go by very quickly. Thank you.
When you get into these shamanic trances, I just,
Step outside of time and space and you go into non-ordinary reality. I was trying to think. I was trying to think just what it is I would like to say about my practice and the work that I do. And there's so much to say, but I will limit it for this panel, trying to get it within the 5 or 6 minutes. There were a lot of things that were said by Stan and also by Jim that really applied to my life and what led me to the work that I'm doing. I've always had a vision of the universe as sacred. As a kid, I was raised Catholic, and the guardian angel wasn't an act of faith, it was an experience for me. So, to me, it wasn't like as if there were, or just kind of hold it on faith that there is, and then, it was an actual experience for me. And the thing that was interesting that I found was, maybe not interesting is the right word, it was sad, that there was nobody I could talk to. There was absolutely nobody. I couldn't talk to my parents because they had this, vision of Catholicism that was just like theology. I couldn't talk to my friends because they thought I was nuts if I told them that I had conversations with my spirit guides, right? And even in school, none of this stuff was taught. As Jim pointed out, in indigenous cultures, it's common to know or to believe in spirits and to work with spirits, to acknowledge your ancestors, to care about the earth, to make decisions that affect the next 7 generations. I wasn't raised in that context, but yet something in me spoke that that was really important. For much of my early life, I did give up my soul to be accepted. I was a Catholic. I was trained how to appease and how to not be myself, but just be someone that would be accepted. And I realized later that this was good training for my shamanic work, because I would become a chameleon. I could be whatever Ray wanted me to be, Lynette wanted me to be, Ingrida wanted me to be. And although at the time I was doing it unconsciously, it was a really good practice for the work that I do much later. I did find when I broke away from the church, I found psychology, and that seemed to speak to me much more than the Catholic religion. And fortunately, I got involved with Jung, who directed me towards Eastern religions and spirituality and all the practices that were talked about, the meditation, the yoga, the pranayama, the fasting, the reading the sacred text, all these kind of things. And I did get into clinical psychology, but I was really disillusioned. It was so focused on pathology, and it didn't seem to speak to me. And although I truly value my background in clinical psychology, it didn't have juice for me. There was something that was missing. And fortunately, I was able to get into a program of humanistic psychology, which actually did speak to me. The fact that, looking at the healthy aspects of human nature. Well, that led to an experience where I actually went on a vision quest. And the vision quest, as you know, is going out in the wilderness by yourself, crying for a vision. And on this vision quest, I had an experience of a very non-ordinary reality, in the sense that my heartbeat started becoming very audible. And to make a long story short, I thought I was having a heart attack, and I thought I was going to die. But I could actually hear. Never heard it before, I've never heard it since. And that heartbeat was like a drum beat for me that took me on a journey where I went somewhere. There was a shift in my consciousness. I went somewhere, I met some animal spirits, and had an incredible experience, one that I'd never really heard about or had any clue about. And when I came back, I had this experience of unitive consciousness. All these things I've been reading about in books for years and years, I had an experience of. And it completely changed my life. This one little journey completely transformed my outlook on life, my connection with the earth, connection with animals, connection with people, connection with myself, connection with spirit. So I looked a little deeper into it and was able to learn a little bit more about shamanism. And is it 30 seconds already? Oh, 1 minute, okay. So what I do in my practice is I do shamanic counseling. And shamanic counseling has 2 forms. One is someone that does not want to learn how to journey, to do the shamanic journey, comes to me, I journey for them, and we discuss that. The other form that I do, which is I prefer to do, is to teach people how to actually do the shamanic journey. Now, I don't teach people to become a shaman. There's a difference there. That's not something that can be taught real easily. It's a longer process. But what I do is to give people an experience of what the shamanic journey is like, what shamans have been doing for tens of thousands of years, of stepping between the 2 worlds, of having a connection with spirit, having a connection with the elements, and to be able to connect to spirit in a way that you can have direct revelation. You can find healing, you can find guidance, you can find empowerment in a fairly simple method. And the thing is that what's really interesting for me is that there is no place for what I just said and what the kind of work I do within mainstream clinical psychology. There are diagnostic categories for what I just said. Spirits don't exist, we all know that. You can't step between the world. What do you mean non-ordinary reality? What you're doing is teaching people how to dissociate. Well, what I found, I've been doing this since about 1974, I know the difference between reality and non-reality. I don't feel that I'm a very disassociative type of person. I also found that people not only do not disassociate through doing and learning this practice, they actually become more grounded, more balanced, and much more integrated. Most of our people in our society are very alienated, dispirited, disempowered, and disconnected. And what I've found is that in this practice of teaching people how to journey, how to connect with spirit, how to step between the two worlds, and how to have this practice become normal is a great way to be spirited, to be connected, to find balance, to find empowerment, and it's a way to connect with one's soul as well as the earth, the elements, spirit, and each other. So, did you wave me yet? Oh, okay. So, let's see. Okay, as I said, 6 minutes is crazy. So I will just thank you for the opportunity to share the work that I do. And if you have any questions, you can ask me afterwards. Thank you.
I am Pierluigi Lattuada from Milan, Italy. I am grateful and happy to be here. I am director of Integral Transpersonal Institute that has 2 programs. One is training in transpersonal psychotherapy, full accredited by the Ministry of University Education and Research. That is, we can degree medical doctor and psychologist in psychotherapy, and another in counseling. But I want to start from the end. The most important thing that I understood in 35 years of clinical work and spiritual practice is that when you disappear to yourself, you find yourself. When we pass to the zero, we enter the transpersonal field. You really understand what does it mean transpersonal. And I realized that all these 35 years in which I founded a discipline, biotransenergetics, that is, of course, is a psychotherapy, but is something more, is an integral, transpersonal, psycho-spiritual discipline, or is my path that I am sharing since '84 with thousands of people. So I understood that all this work in these 35 years was just to realize that we have to disappear from ourselves. And so biotransenergetics, that is my methodology of work, that is of my way of life, of life, is a technology of sacred, is something to learn and to remember me in every time that I have to disappear to myself. But I want to tell you a little story. In early 70s, I entered medicine faculty and I were fighting against the system to change the world. I think like many of you. And in the late 60s, 70s, I went to Brazil. No, I met bioenergetics, that is Low and Reich, they work on body psychotherapy. It was such a revelation for me and was very helpful for me. But I felt that there were something missing. I don't knew what. And I realized when in '82 I went to Brazil for the first time. My ex-wife is Brazilian, so we went to Brazil to find a family. For me, Brazil was just samba and carnival. I didn't like it at all. But since I am here, I said, I want to know something about Macumba, the syncretic cult rituals. I went in one of these rituals and was one of the most transformative experiences in my life. For the first time, I realized what does it mean to shift from the head to the heart. Of course, we can read, we can knowledge what is, but I felt for the first time with all my bodies, of all my soul and my mind, what does it mean? I could merge, I could dive into something that I never knew. And this diving into the essence, into the spirits, into the field, into the mana, was a rebirthing for me. And was the beginning of biotransenergetics. Since that time, I started to search which structures of behavior, which structure of feeling, of thinking, allow us to have such experience. To enter and to be in contact with the source, with the spirit, with the transformative process, the Mahamudra that say in Vedanta or Tantric way. So, since that time, I built up a technology, a methodology that now I teach in these two schools. We have hundreds of students and we have quite a hundred of psychotherapists that in Italy are sharing biotransenergetics. It's such incredible for me. It's my life. I invented something and now there are people that are working with this, that are helping people, that are transforming her and this life. Is a miracle, and I am very grateful for this. Thank you.
My name is Brandt Corteret, and I teach at CIS. I find it actually kind of difficult to talk about my own practice. And part of it is that it's a constantly moving target. I feel like I am continually revising how I'm seeing this whole process of healing. Because to me, that's the fundamental question. What is healing? And my way of thinking about that now is very different than I've thought about it 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 20 years ago. And I realized that actually my own journey in terms of being a psychotherapist has corresponded to my own spiritual journey. I began psychology really out of Buddhist practice. That was really my first way into the universe. Well, LSD first, then Buddhism. And then psychology. And so the first 15 years or so, I was deeply immersed in sort of the ways in which Buddhism and mindfulness could be brought into psychology, and particularly Gestalt therapy, existential psychology, and psychotherapy, focusing somatic approaches. The whole humanistic existential stream spoke to me. While I was really deeply immersed in the path of what Aurobindo calls the impersonal divine. And the path of the impersonal divine and of awareness and of coming into the here and now, coming into the body, it's powerful and beautiful. And then about 30 years ago, I read Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo opened me up to another dimension of the divine, what he calls the personal divine. And I'd always put down the personal divine, coming out of Buddhism, of course. It seemed kind of an illusion. But Aurobindo opened me up to the reality of this, and to the reality of the soul, and to the reality of the world. And so in opening to the soul, in opening to the personal divine, my own psychotherapy began to change to be more relational. I opened more to contemporary psychoanalytic ways of working. Much of the discourse in transpersonal psychology, I think, involves a lot of psychoanalysis bashing. And mostly I think it's creating a straw man for psychoanalysis. It's talking about the psychoanalysis of Freud, or of psychoanalysis of 50 years ago. But the psychoanalysis of today bears scant resemblance to that. It is deeply relational. It is fundamentally relational, intersubjective. And in some ways, it's really about the process of longing. In the same way that the soul longs for the divine, we long for connection. The heart longs for connection. So increasingly, I have shifted not away from Buddhism, but really including another dimension in my own spiritual practice. And it's really opened up this contemporary psychoanalytic way of working. Within, I think, a humanistic existential framework of also seeing how feelings exist in the body. So currently, I want to be as centered in the heart as possible. And since the soul speaks through the heart, right, in the personal divine traditions, and certainly in integral yoga, the soul actually is behind the heart chakra and communicates by feelings. Not so much by thought, but by feelings. And so I find myself more and more interested in looking at what are the blocks to the heart. That opening the heart seems to me a deeply psycho-spiritual process. That it's not just a spiritual process, it's not just a psychological process, it's a psycho-spiritual process. I think in the description of this panel, it said, how do you bring in the transpersonal into your clinical work? And to me, the question is somewhat put wrongly. It's not so much transpersonal something I bring in. It's not something added on. The whole process is deeply transpersonal from the beginning. It's a psycho-spiritual process from the very beginning. So I think coming out of Aurobindo, what is healing for me involves each of these 4 levels that he talks about. Body, heart, mind, and spirit. So all healing involves each of these. Some types, some persons, some issues, some dimensions more than others. But my own sense is that all four are really involved in everybody's psychological healing, physical healing, so I want to work with all four dimensions with my clients. I want to work with how they are in their body, what's happening in terms of their diet, their exercise, to what extent they are, not just have a physical practice, but to what extent they can feel their feelings in their body. I know many really good yoga teachers who are really in their body in one way, but totally out of touch with their feelings. You can be in your body and still out of touch with your feelings. So I also want to get people in touch with their feelings in the body. The opening of the heart through the relationship, through the past, through the current outside life, working with the mind in the same ways cognitive therapists do, looking for irrational beliefs. And spiritually, how do we work to create both a spiritual field and to also work, I got pretty sick about 5 years ago, and in my own healing I realized that I had been pretty unaware of the energetic dimension of psychotherapy, and I had been like this. In opening the heart, I had opened up energetically to all of my clients, everything. I was like a motel room, it said vacancy, room available. And so this is still a pretty new part for me. I feel like a beginner here, because I'm trying to practice good energy hygiene with my clients. Where I want to be as open in the heart as possible, but I don't want to be so open that I'm letting in everything. I want to have good energy boundaries as well. I want the room and the space to have a clear energy field. I want to make sure that other influences around us are also good. Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you.
I'm Vladimir Maikov. I am the president of Russian Association of Transpersonal Psychology and Psychotherapy and chair of Transpersonal Psychology at Moscow Institute of Psychoanalysis. During lunch break with Stephen Aline, my very good friend, we visited Whole Food store. And that reminded me a story I heard from Stan Grove about the founder of Whole Food store, who got the very idea of such business from his experience participating in holotropic breathwork with Stan in New York many years ago. And later he published this story in New York Times magazine. And it brings into my mind a thought that even short, really transpersonal experience can change your life completely. It's irreversible. What you put there into your mind, it's impossible to extract again out. There is no delete button in psyche. We will keep everything. And so even small seed of real experience can catalyze a really great change. And we can find this in many wisdom traditions, in traditional societies. John Kabat-Zinn, in his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, shares the custom of Vietnamese peasant. They are walking on the rice field, and in spontaneous moment, the bell is ringing in the village. And they stop the walk, and they look into sky. There is sky. And we, like sky, are infinite. And then they go back to rice field, to everyday activity, and then in unpredictable moment, again, the bell ring. And they again stop, and they again remember who they really are. So I think that the main transpersonal practice is to remember who we really are. It was Georgy Ivanovich Gurdjieff who always taught the students, remember who you are, who used different alarms to re-awake them and to return them back. And so for me, the main connection between transpersonal and practice with life is just remember and just be. In a sense, we can say that before transpersonal, chop wood, carry water, and after transpersonal, chop wood, carry water, and I can say, rephrasing famous John Reed book, 10 Days That Shocked the World, something like that, yes? We can think about 10 great transpersonal events that change the world irreversibly or will change. First, satellite. In 1975, satellite was sent to cosmos, and we all citizens of Earth saw this picture of Earth from cosmos. Who we are looking at this picture? Where we are? Directly in cosmos. So this event extract all our mind into cosmos and make all us, initiated all humanity into transpersonal. Second, Hoffman, Watsman, Grof, and all other psychedelic pioneers. It's irreversible. It's impossible to delete psychedelic revolution and its impact on our society. Third, what is third? Third, it's cartography of real cartography, extended cartography of psyche. It was Grof who first from Western scientists proved the wisdom of ancient tradition. We are not limited. We are infinite. The nature of psyche is shunyata, unlimited possibility. Fourth, internet, Silicon Valley, communicative revolution. It's just manifestation of inner nature of our consciousness. Our consciousness, it's infinite. There is no limits in communication in ideal or God consciousness, so it's just embodied. Fifth, forming of global world, global village. Is it reversible? I don't think so. Sixth, revolution in education. It's completely transpersonal impact on everything. Seven, reconnecting with all human wisdom of all tradition, of all cultures. 8, exploit of creativity everywhere, in every field. 9, care of the universe, not only by your family, your nation, universe. And 10, guess what? Global future, global enlightenment. It should be irreversible. So thank you.
Thank you, panel. Once again, are there any questions for our panelists?
Amma, Amma, Amma.